Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of not TCG Tentative. Today we're going to try and make some sort of resource system to, well, this nonsense that we came up with last time. Now, the first thing I guess is just the cards themselves. Because cards are probably one of the most important resources. If you don't have cards in your deck, then that's a deck out, game over. I love that. That looks a little bit... Oh no, is that legible? I don't think that's legible. That's a little bit better. So we have cards, right? And then, well, the issue here is that if you only have cards as a resource, drawing a card becomes really powerful. So that's also something we don't want to become too crazy. What's a good example? I suppose. Yeah. Drawing cards becomes really, really powerful. If you can just, outright play them. Holy cow. It's not. That's right. It's me. I'm not. So, I'm thinking that we want another form. Other than cards that you just play onto the field, right? We want some other form of limitation to your action. Something that really prevents you from flowing through your entire deck in one go. Unless you... Well, no, we don't talk about your deck being designed to be blown through in one go. That should not happen. It will happen, but it should not happen in, at the very least, I'm going to try and limit that form of degeneracy. Hopefully. So yeah, we have cards on the field like this. Then I guess some sort of cost, right? What is a cost? Well, it costs any resource, right? Any resource. But then currently that goes back to just cards. So if you only have cards as resources, you start to get limited into things like drop cards, or sorry, discard a card, mill the top deck of your card, and I guess that's right. And remove cards from the field. Your cards from the field. Right. So those are the three things. It's relatively simple, right? But again, the moment you have cards that say if this card is in the graveyard, it gets to do funny things, like bring it back onto the field, we get a little bit of a problem if there isn't a cost. Yes, I do believe recycling should be very doable, except you still need to pay a price. You have to pay a price. So that price is possibly, I think, let's move the cost over here to the side right now. And then we'll go ahead and say like this card, self-mill. So while these are technically conventional costs, cards that actually want you to mill them or send them to the graveyard must have them as a positive price. So that actually makes them more expensive. Given like the archetype, right? Maybe, yeah. You can think about like MTG Dredge, which was designed as a cost instead of, which was designed as a drawback instead of a cost. It should have been a cost. Well, sorry, that's a weird way to word it. Well, it was designed as a net negative, so it would reduce the actual power level of the card, is what the dredge was supposed to do. Except being, in like black, and how the black mana gang decides this, they like throwing all their cards into the graveyard. Dredge actually became a boon, because instead of, drawing one, you could return that same dredge card from the graveyard to your hand, and then mill like 3. Which would, it's like +1, and then mill 3 more, which is effectively like +3 for a black player. So, crazy effect. That is a crazy effect. That is huge on recursion and really powerful. So yes, it's conventional. Oh right, but other costs, right? Other costs. Since I think I want some form of mana. It doesn't have to be mana, but it has to be some sort of energy that, well, not energy, just another numerical value that keeps everything in check, right? Because when you have like 1 billion cards in your hand, you can play all of them onto. If there is no mana cost, or things like just discard and self-mill, right? So let's say this doesn't exist, and we only have these sorts of costs. Oh wait, hang on, there's one more. Move from your... Right? Let's say we didn't have any of this, and we only had this as our potential price to pay for playing cards, right? What happens is we can fill our deck with a whole bunch of draw twos, or even just like draw ones to continuously refresh our hand and get a really, really good pool of cards. And what you do with that is you fill up the entire board with, I don't know, your entire hand like that. And maybe there's another effect between like the synergies here that let you like draw another 2 cards or something, and you can fill up your board again, and it starts getting a little bit crazy. You see, now that really enables your full board, right? Of course, I mean, there's stuff like this card, right? But that's fine, right? You have abilities that just let you draw more cards, or at least you can get cards that let you draw more cards. So if this is the only thing, then yes, drawing cards becomes like really, really dangerous. But you want to, on having a flow of cards so that you can actually play the game, you don't want to bust out, just like 2 cards per turn and draw 1 card and play the long mid-range game. Maybe that's not your way of play. It also doesn't promote interaction, because, oh yeah, I'm just gonna play 1 card this turn, or I'm just gonna play 2 cards this turn. That doesn't really sound fun. It sounds limiting, right? Oh, and the self-mill just like, I don't know, it doesn't really exist, right? Whenever you mill cards, just think of, putting them in the bottom. And it's even better if your deck has, graveyard synergy. Remove from the field is a little bit more interesting. So, you have like, I don't know, 2 cards, right? This is Yu-Gi-Oh stuff. You have 2 cards, you kind of remove them, right? And you get a bigger card. And, that's fine. That actually works to your advantage, because usually 1 big card it does the job of being of larger deterrence than 2 small cards, because your opponent might be able to remove 2 small cards, but they can't remove 1 big card. So there's that as well as a cost. That is interesting, right? Then yeah, so what is the limitation to prevent you from dumping your entire hand? Well, normally, I think Yu-Gi-Oh does this by giving you 1 normal summon, so you can take one card and throw it onto the board. And that's actually when you want background. Yu-Gi-Oh has a background, right? You have, you can play as many spell or trap cards as you like, as long as you have them in your hand. Which is why older Yu-Gi-Oh does value these. You love your back row because you can only summon 1 guy per turn. You gotta make that summon count. But another problem, of course, is that now modern Yu-Gi-Oh just says, well, you can special summon this one, special summon this one, special summon this one. This one just kind of lets you draw like more cards, and you also have your extra deck, which is just effectively a hand of 15 cards that you can always access. I know, it sounds so dumb. Like, you can just summon the guy from the extra deck whenever you want, whenever you need him. It's a little bit stupid, I agree. Because you can just rip him. It's a free +1, right? And usually that card comes with oh no, another say like, oh well, when you special summon this, draw 2 or draw 1 and then keep on extending or search your deck for a card. It gets dumb. Um, we don't want to see that level of power creep. If we ever do hit the point where really the only way out, then the game is finished. The game is complete. I feel like, oh, okay. Maybe not like completely finished, but it's getting there, right? You're moving on to like a whole different animal. So yeah, there's that to consider. No, okay, now we consider if we have mana now, right? This is what magic does, and well, also what Hearthstone does, and also what Shadowverse does, and also what oh my gosh, also what Pokemon does. Well, Pokemon has energy, which is like a variation of mana. Also what the whole live trading card game does. Also like almost every other card game really has some sort of mana value. Crazy, I know. It's like they were like, wow, let's not follow into the footsteps of Yu-Gi-Oh! Yeah. The one thing that we all look to and say, oh my gosh, how did that get there? How do we get there? I mean, you know the reason. It's, you know, power creep, right? And it's also what do you do once you saturate your entire card pool with thousands of cards? Where do you go? Because like there's a natural power creep progression, which it sucks. I wish. Well, I mean, the other option is like diving deep into gimmicks, right? Real deep into gimmicks, and sometimes those gimmicks are technically power creep, but it's, you know, a more creative form of it. I think I think that's a lot. I don't think. What am I talking about? Mana. What do we do with mana? Right. So you know, yeah, we were talking about this. You have some sort of mana cost, right? It's like, oh, it costs 3 mana to play this card, right? And so you have, I don't know, what kind of some way to accumulate mana. You need a way to accumulate mana. That's also a part of this system. Well, the question becomes, how do I want to accumulate this sort of resource? Because for cards, it's +1 at the start of at round start. Do I actually want it that way? +1 per round. Naturally. Okay, think about that for a second. If it's +1 per round, then there's sort of an issue that happens, maybe, depending on the curve of mana that your deck runs. The issue becomes that you run out of cards to play very quickly. Say, think about it, you start, depending on your starting hand, right? You have a starting hand of 7. You're expected to maybe play 1 card on turn 1. 2 cards on turn 2. And let's say 2 cards on turn 3 as well. And then 3 card, maybe a 3-card combo, I don't know, or maybe a 1 big card. And then that's That's actually that's actually a little bit more sustainable than I thought. Okay, maybe like on turn 5 you pull like a 3-card combo, right? And we'll 7, right? 8, 9, 10, 11, right? Total cards that you kind of have. Well, in theory, I guess, like, by the time you get here, yeah, you're expected to, like, drop maybe 2 cards. Or, like, 3 here. Well, maybe not 2, or 3. 7, 8, 9, 11. And maybe you drop only, like, 2 this turn. So how much is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, well, that lasts you quite a lot. Yeah, no, that's fine. But then again, you're playing what? 2 cards per turn. And this is an okay back and forth because it's your turn. You set 2 cards down on the field, and then your opponent sets 2 cards down on the field, right? And then you set 2 cards down on the field. So it's okay in that sense, but we can afford maybe a little bit more because we want a better back and forth. It's not just I summon, okay, I counter summon, then I counter summon. Well, I counter summon, and then I'm all out of juice already. Right? Like, that's not really back and forth. That's barely any. It's okay, but it feels small. That's like a turn 1 move. That's a turn 1 move. Okay, so if that's a turn 1 move, that's okay. But if everything needs a cost, that means you are playing at minimum like 2 costs, right? 2 mana worth, because that's 2 cards. At the very bare minimum, right? And that's an interesting starting point. Maybe I should start both players off with 3 mana. Starting mana 3? Three. Well, I guess, yeah, that lets you play at most 3 cards out of your hand. Considering that we're not trying to go for 0 cost cards yet. One of these days power creep is gonna come upon us and it will eventually go, hey, yeah, free cards, why don't you? I don't know, it's an interesting thing to ask, because what if your gimmick is 3 cards? Everything is really weak, but you can just blow through your whole hand. What if you could do that? That's your game plan. That would be pretty cool. But it would be a nightmare to balance. Because... well, maybe not. We'll have to see. Sounds kind of bad, though. Bad as in difficult to balance. And enabling lots of lots of degenerate play. But I digress. You have a certain value. You could say, okay, I play the big 3 cost in front of your 1 little cost. Well, I chain 3 in here, right? It's like, okay, yeah, no, that gives us a huge pool of choice. I think I kind of like that. Because it skips you from the weird and awkward turn 1, I just play 1 measly card and call it a day, right? This jumpstarts you into a very potential back and forth already. But then, that's like saying, I expect you to play at least 3 cards from the start. Or not at least 3, somewhere between 1 to 3 cards from the very beginning of the game. And if you have, like 3, or if you draw into 5 or 7, well, I mean, you draw 1, you have 6, you start with 6, or you start with 8, really. You are blowing, if it's 6, you're blowing through half your hand already. If it's 8, I mean, you're still blowing through a good chunk. It's not half, but it's still a substantial amount. I suppose there's also a numerical value I have to think about in regards to the card statistics and abilities, because maybe we actually want double. Maybe you want to start with like 6 or 5 or 7 mana, similar to the number of cards that you start out with. So let's say you start with, I don't know, 7, right? That's a lot. But if we say that most cards have a balanced value of 3, then you'll see maybe like 3, 2 pips will actually be key to your success. Or maybe you want a full gimmick of 1 pip that does let you flood the board on turn 1 and get a substantial amount of synergy. But that also means, you're vulnerable to maybe like a 3 cost area of effect that wipes it all out. Stuff like that, right? Although I would say, well, if we're starting out with this sort of deal, what's stopping us from, I don't know, taking advantage? Well, I mean, okay, hear me out. I recently dived into the Digimon trading card game, and they had this interesting thing that looks like a number line. And this is the memory system. So, how it works is when you play a card, it has a memory cost. And after you play all the memory cost, you move, let me start from the very beginning. It's a number line, and you start at 0. And when you play a card that has a memory cost, you move this token over that many spaces to your opponent's side. And if it goes into the negatives for you, which is the positives for your opponent, it becomes your opponent's turn. So, this, I think, sort of works. Sort of. Except you can sort of hold your turn on hostage infinitely because your opponent doesn't get a chance to respawn until you hit that negative, right? Which means if you have a whole bunch of cards that synergize with you bouncing back and forth, right? Bounce back and forth here, then you're never gonna give your opponent a turn. Uh-oh. What did I do? Ooh. Safe. So, of course, as the game developed, you got a whole bunch of interesting mechanics that really let you do that. It's another form of just power creep in general. So yeah, it's my turn forever, and by the time it becomes your turn, I have my unbreakable board of destruction. Good luck. Yeah, not what we're looking for, but the idea of being able to play one card and letting your opponent play an equal amount or slightly greater, and then forcing you to go back and forth like that is really, really cool. The issue is that you don't really want your opponent to get a turn in at all. So you just play like the minimum cost of like, oh, here's -1 for me, and here's +1 to you, and they're like, oh, well, I guess I can only play 2 cards, and they can be like 2 1-cost cards, and it's your turn. But if I really want to make a big move, I have to play a slightly bigger card, right? But then, that would mean my opponent would get, much larger access to cards. And then that would mean they get to, like, bounce back by playing a whole bunch more, which is not good for you. So, playing one big card gives your opponent a really huge card advantage. Well, card on the field advantage. And I don't think it was really balanced between the two. Like, sure, the big card can destroy your little cards, like the smaller cost cards, but in terms of player damage, they really did the same amount of damage. And your large card was actually at a larger risk of getting destroyed. Well, maybe not. It's balanced. So there's that to consider. Destroyed by the shield mechanics, right? Because the train card used shield mechanics, much like what we discussed last episode. So I'm not quite convinced on this system, but it does have that ideal promotion of if you play a big card, your opponent gets to play a big card back. And instead of some kind of some kind of infinitely growing counter that just kind of goes, it just keeps on growing, or it hits a limit at like 10, which can never happen, by the way, because that's like 10 turns. The game ends like 10 cost cards are like game ending cards. Almost. But basically they're game ending. It's not quite I wouldn't really call it balanced. It just ends the game. Like you just win if you can play a 10 cost card. That's kind of how it is. If your opponent is still alive after you play a 10 cost card, that's commendable. So there's that as well. Well, I mean, yes, there's a way to cheat out your mana in some of these games. it's not really like a you win button. It still gives your opponent maybe like half a fighting chance. Cause like, yeah, but I mean, if somehow you already have the advantage, then yeah, it's set in stone. Well, I kind of want to do something between these two things because the cap here with this back and forth memory system does tickle my funny bone in terms of balance. It's really, I think it is quite balanced, right? I mean, think about it. I play a 3-cost card, which lets you play a 3-cost card and another cost card. And then whatever that cost is, I can play that and I can play another. So it's an equal back and forth. Until someone says, yeah, I'm gonna play a 10-cost card. But nobody really does that. Like, if you play a 10-cost card, right, your opponent gets to dump a whole bunch on you. And then on the next turn, they can just swing at you for 5 damage or something because they summoned a whole bunch of smaller monsters that you can't destroy all at once. So yeah, playing a big monster does not help. I guess... no. I was gonna say, maybe... implement, like... defense cards? I don't know, but... sounds like a nothing ever happens card. And... you don't really want those either, that doesn't promote interaction, it just promotes stall. At that point, it's like, well, I guess I just have to keep on drawing and building on my board until I can break his defender, right? 'Cause if I can't get through that, then what am I supposed to do? I mean, yeah, you could sacrifice, I don't know, sacrifice maybe one attacker if you play like a flood board that does flood the board, or deck that does flood the board, sorry. A board that floods the board. Amazing, yes. No. But yeah, okay, so... it doesn't quite work. That's the issue. Mana, however, is tried and true. So maybe we might try something different with that. Maybe. What if this is like a to sit player between player agreement, right? We have an overload, we have a starting value, but that value does not increase until we implement the overload mechanic, right? Mana overload, what is that? Well, you see here, your bigger cards probably can't be played on turn 1 because the starting value is too small, right? So at a certain point, you want to increase that value, but that value does not naturally increase. What you can do is you can play cards that increase that maximum capacity for everybody on the next turn. Is it a disadvantage for you? Possibly. Possibly. Is it... well, hang on. Well, if you're the one playing the card, yes, because you're losing out on a card. if it was embedded into, something a little bit more permanent, like a unit, then also maybe, right? But what I'm thinking is instead of it being a card, it can be a tacit agreement. Or rather, no, it's an agreement. It has to be an agreement between both players. That they just simply say they simply both agree, right? Well, I guess another issue here is that if maybe somebody has the card advantage and or the field advantage, and they don't want to let that go, right? Or maybe their deck is just filled with like one cost pips, and they're like, hey, I don't really care about increasing the value. I can do this all day. I can dump 1 cost and 2 cost cards onto the board and I can win. That's my game plan. Right? Just preventing you from using the overload mechanic because you just don't have to agree with, you just don't agree with it. So maybe it's, yeah. I suppose when you call overload, you have to call overload, and that increases the mana value for that turn. I suppose that's an interesting way of doing it. So each round the players can call overload, which increases, well, so wait, each round overload can be triggered once. Okay. Yeah, what if each round the overload can be triggered once? So it's a once per turn, and any player can call it. And when they call it, that becomes the starting value for future rounds. I think that might be interesting, actually. Yeah. So what would be the starting value then? I'm still thinking 3 is a good value to start with. And yes, you can call overload on that turn. I don't know, should you be able to call overload on turn 1? I don't think so. I think, well, no, you should be. Yeah. So in theory, your starting value is 4 if you do decide to call overload. So what's the drawback, right? When you call overload, does it just increase the value by 1? How effective is that? Should it, like, increase... Should it give both players some form of, like, extra card play? Like, or, like, draw 1 or something? I don't know. Because the way this benefits a player by letting them, let's see, right? Say you have a 3 or a 4. Let's say you have like a 4 cost card in your starting hand, right? And your opponent decides to set the board. And then you say, okay, well, I'm going to call overload. And then I'm going to play my 4 cost card, which is huge. And then that gives your opponent, 1 more cost to maybe balance out the scales, right? Then that's it. That's effectively it. It's strange for the players to be calling the back and forth, though. It's almost telegraphed. Like, I am going to play a big card at this point. should it be like both players get 3 chances to overload, right? And then the starting value, well, that can get kind of crazy, actually. I don't know if I want it to be like that, because if you have 3 chances to overload, and then you just stack overloads until you hit 9 on the first turn, that's also really bad for the next turn. I mean, first of all, your hand is empty. Second of all, yeah, first of all, your hand is probably empty. Second of all, you are playing at full power starting from turn 2, which is also crazy. Oh yeah, this is definitely tough. I mean, I think there is merit to maybe testing these. Testing this and testing this. I don't know if I want to test this. The big, do I really want that? Maybe not. I don't know. Might as well test it, I suppose. Then you have... I guess... yeah, probably. This sounds interesting. Just some form of being able to manually increase the values, the mana values by choice. Right? Yeah, maybe have like a maximum cap, right? Maximum of 10, something like that. I don't really know, because Magic the Gathering doesn't really have a maximum. It's just a maximum of how many lands you can get on the field and how many rocks and dorks you can also get on the field, right? And how many of permanents you can slap on there. That's how much mana they generate. Green cheats out mana by spitting extra lands. Red cheats out mana with fast mana. I mean, black also has fast mana. White and blue don't really have much. I mean, black doesn't really have too much fast mana. But, yeah, I mean, it kind of has some weird, like, sacrificial loops. Weird stuff. I mean, each color really has sort of its own cheat out. Blue, blue lets you draw extra cards, so I mean, not mana, but a different resource, right? You cheat out a different resource better. I suppose it does. Overload lets the power of raising, well, the power of power creep. It puts the power of power creep into the player's hands. You can choose to either, stay at this low level of mana or increase it. Maybe. What else? What other methods of accumulating mana is, just another resource. It doesn't have to be mana, it can be energy. Just the second resource outside of cards. The resource that you use to play cards, right? Do I want a division of energy? I don't think so. Because while it is cool to have various colors, it also becomes sort of a mess. Streamlining it is better. Oh, well, I guess it also becomes like, how do you separate archetypes, right? Where do you draw the line? What stops you from making a deck of time travelers and dinosaurs? And getting time travelers to send your dinosaurs to the future. Or sending your dinosaurs from the future back to the past consistently to keep them alive, right? Preventing the meteor from striking. Things like that. Well, nothing really. Just maybe card synergy, but when you put it that way, all the gimmicks can get some synergy when split together. Oh, sorry, when spliced together, right? So that's a big a big And oh man, so we have the 1, 2, 10. We have maybe. Well, no. See, the other thing here is if there's another thing. If your deck needs to have energy in the form of cards itself, that is also an issue because you're ripping through your cards twice as fast. Sort of. Not twice as fast, but you're expected to, like get a land drop almost every turn, right? Hopefully, because if you get behind on mana, that means you can play less powerful cards than your opponent. So that also becomes a little bit nasty, right? And that's where I guess you want to draw more cards and everything. Yeah. We have a number line. The skill. Oh, yeah, and the resource being a card, I think that is off the table. I don't really quite like the sound of that. This resource should at least be a little bit more usable than that. Or more accessible. Yeah, or should it just kind of increase every turn, right? There's that. Is the staple, is the standard. Then again, I don't... It involuntarily increasing is sort of weird. What if we made things a little more complicated? What if we said... You can have reserve mana. What if? Reserve mana. Okay, that's a huge what if. mana that you can save across turns, or for us it's across rounds, right? So usually when you pass the turn, right, your resources end, they reset. You know, you make an exchange and then they reset on the next round, on the next turn. You untap or whatever, right? Or the bar restores to full and it gets a little bit bigger. The other thing is that that means that having any leftover mana is bad. You don't want that. You don't like that. And the way blue sort of, right, in Magic the Gathering, blue mana just has a good number of instant spells you can play. Some of them is just like, hey, draw 2, right? And so, I mean, they also have counter spells as instants, so depending on the situation, you can be like, oh, well, since you're not actually playing anything really dangerous this turn, I guess I can, you know, waste my mana at your end step and go ahead and draw an extra card. And then on the next, gotta hold on to the cards and just wait for you to do something in response to that. It's very reactionary sort of playstyle. Well, if you build it that way. But with reserve mana, it's like saying, okay, well, I don't really care what happens on turn 1, or whatever, right? I'm just going to pass, and I'm going to save my 3 mana that becomes 6 on the next turn, so I can play something bigger. Now your opponent has to do a couple things, right? You have to declare reserve. You declare, right? So once you declare reserve, you can't take it back. Because you've already, it's like you're already sending that mana into the next turn, into the future already. So that's your final action for this turn, this round. That's interesting, actually. Because that lets you save up for really big guns. But at the same time, that also means, you know, you're letting your opponent just kind of whack you for free. Right? That also becomes an issue. Maybe on turn 1, that's okay? I don't know. It's high risk, high reward sort of drawback. And what difference really is there other than, I don't know, playing like a larger cost card? Because, well, maybe that is what you want to do for larger cost cards. I know. Like, card games have probably thought about all of these, and they were like, yeah, let's just go back to the standard 1 to 10, right? Let's go back to the standard 1 to 10 and call it a day. Like, how creative do we have to get? How convoluted and creative does it have to get until you go, yeah, let's take a step back and go back to what actually we know works? I mean, I'm actually perfectly fine with this sort of setup, right? The 1 to 10 works. I can tell you that much. It just does. So I wouldn't be opposed to that. It's just that the first 5 turns are kind of slow. And also because I have to think about what is a 1 cost card, right? What is a 2 cost card? Or what is a 3 cost card? Like, what do those look like? And that becomes, I suppose, a design issue. Well, that's an issue for future, not. We have to, yeah, it's sort of that's when playtesting really comes into play. We just have to test it. I mean, yes, you can make like a whole entire spreadsheet and think about it, but at this stage, I don't really have enough experience thinking about how this board and the links themselves work. Right? Remember, we also have links. And these guys can help each other out. So there's that as well. Which shakes things up a lot. Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh, man. I know it's uncreative, but I think I'm leaning more towards these guys. These guys, right there. Overload may or may not happen. It's interesting that you have to call it out on that turn. But calling it isn't... It puts you at a disadvantage, doesn't it? Because your opponent can also respond. Well, you're already raising a cost for your opponent. Yeah, there's that too. That was really cool though. I think I want to try that. Well, then again, like, how complex does the game need to be? Because, first of all, we already have Ether Right Grid. We have links and bonuses, and we have synergies, and we have stats here. And we have some speed and defense rules, right? And we have shield points. That is a lot to, I think, get into. For me, maybe for you, maybe, but for me, it's easily graspable. This triple layer, maybe we might not actually set this one up, but I think it's really cool. I want to at least like try it. So this exists. This is, I don't know. Oh, what if? Oh, wait a second. Okay. Alright. Hear me out. What if you had a mana tank? Well, what if you had a tank, right? What if you had a mana tank? Or just resource tank, right? What if you had this resource tank? And then, when you play a card, right? You decrease that resource tank. But when a card returns... But when a card leaves the field... Hold on. When a card leaves the field, you get that resource back. Think about it this way. I have, let's say you start with 10 mana, right? You start with 10 mana. You play 2 cards that are 5 cost cards, right? So now you have 0 mana. Zero mana in the tank, right? But within the exchange, your opponent plays like their 10 cost card and removes one of your 5 cost card manas, right? 5 cost cards. So now you have 5 mana. You get 5 mana back. So now that goes back into the tank. Oh my goodness. Hang on. This is really good. This is really good. This makes sense. And the reason why it makes sense is because of our time system. Remember, we have all of this. So what happens when all the cards leave the field? What happens to them? Nothing. They just go into the discard pile. The cards that are placed at the top level layer have a terrible lifespan, which makes them horrible to play. You don't want to play on the top layer, except they're designed in a way that they give you, a lot more damage or effects for their value because they're intended to be a one-turn existence. However, in that cube of yours, you can only store so much energy in it. You can only manifest so much energy in it before it dissipates. Oh yes, there's a cool limit. And so, on your turn, if you have maybe like a 10 cost card here on the board, you are a sitting duck. Your opponent has to play around this with whatever they have in their hand, right? But they also have a limitation of 10 cost to work around on the field, on the board. And hey, if your 10 cost card is destroyed that turn, then you can recover on the this works. Dork with considerable delay. No, you, Dork. You're late. Welcome back. We're talking about a resource tank where you play a card on the field and that card takes up that amount of mana until it leaves the field. And once it leaves the field, it goes back into the resource tank for you to play more cards. So while your opponent can empty out your field and disrupt your team combination, your synergy here with some AoE nukes, right? They're also enabling you to play more cards in response. And they're also, they also just kind of like destroyed your board setup, which means you have to draw more cards and go through your deck for that same combination, right? Maybe you had a really good combination on the board and that just got wiped. You can't recover from that well. But it gives you a comeback. It gives you a way to come back. This is really good. This is really cool. I really like this resource tank system, I think. Now, the problem here is, when does your mana come back, right? Does it come back at the end of the turn? Does it come back the next round? And I think it should come back the next round. Because, say I play like, if I had like 10 mana and I played like a 5/5, and then my opponent plays, I don't know, the 3-cost AoE wipe destroys that. Well, maybe it's another 5 cost. Well, no, it's a 3 cost. It's just that good. It's just that good of a card. It just wipes out these guys, right? Well, they should return to the resource tank, but they don't immediately return to the tank, right? That happens on the step where the cards disappear from the top layer and back into your tank. So yeah, they destroy that and they play maybe like a fat 7 cost card, and that's the end of the turn, right? You've already used up your costs. You've already used up your resources. But on the next turn, you gain back that 10 mana that you just wasted. That got destroyed. Your opponent, however, well, and your opponent gets back their 3 cost. Their 3 mana, because let's say this is like a spell, right? So it's a temporary card. It's super temporary, right? So that immediately dissipates and goes back to the resource tank at turn end. Right. No, that makes sense, because, you know, if you played a card and if the moment it disappeared it went back into the resource tank, then you could do some really nasty stuff. No, that's, yeah, it has to be on the round end, or the turn end. Yeah, this is really good. This makes sense. I like it a lot. We're going to use a resource tank. Now, the other issue becomes, how big is this? Because, I mean, we were looking at like 10, right? Costs of 1 to 10. So if we just, what do we start out with? Does the tank grow as the game progresses? Or is it a static value that effectively means we have this awkward back and forth on turn 1 that lasts a little longer? I guess it sort of makes sense, because both players set up their field, right? And then they have maybe, I don't know, that's a weird way to think about it, right? So if I have a card here, and then say, yeah, like what's the point of starting with 1 mana, going 2 mana, going 3 mana? What is the point, right? Why do we do that? Why not just start out with the full tank? Well, I suppose it also goes into, you know, like, oh, I play my 10 card boss monster, 10 cost boss monster, and call it a day, right? That's actually really cool. That makes big cost archetypes work. I mean, think about it this way. You know, we've burned people from, well, not from poor. We burn like noobs for playing a deck that is just filled with like only big monsters, right? Like, Timmy, you can't play all of those cards. You have to wait until turn 10. Or maybe, I don't know, you're Shaman, or you play green. So it's like, well, no, I actually just have to wait until turn 6. Yeah. But yeah, now this is viable, right? You have this big boss monster that just kind of sits in the middle of the field. And while, yes, it is easy to play around, possibly, it does force your opponent to, you know, play around it, or play at it on it. It's really powerful, I think. I kind of like that archetype. And you know, each big monster will obviously have its own sort of special ability, its power, right? And you need you need to find an answer to that. Maybe it's as simple as trample, right? Or maybe it's indestructible. But it only, you know, they only last up to like 10 turns or something like that. Yeah. Oh, no, this is great. I don't mind you actually dumping your entire hand like that. No, that works. And in fact, you aren't really incentivized to dump your entire hand. Not quite, right? Because remember, if you do that on the next turn, you might not have any cards to play. You might not have any answers to against your opponent, right? But there is a good back and forth that can be done. Oh man, that is interesting. No, yeah, right. It also makes playing, you know, it also makes you worry about big cards. Having more big cards in your deck does actually work out quite well now. Oh my gosh, this is really cool. You have multiple like small cards. Maybe if you like gave yourself like draw power, you know, that works. Oh yeah, I'm really liking this resource tank here. We're using this. I need to actually test this out. This ASAP. This goes in right here. This is huge. This is huge. Oh man, a resource tank. A recycling oh yes. It's great. I really oh man. Oh, it's all coming together. It's all coming together. I suppose the other part is the exchange loss, right? Because let's say you play. Oh, let me use that example. Yeah. So let's say you play a soldier, right? And your opponent plays a knight, and the knight beats the soldier. What happens here is you lose the exchange, right? But now you know your opponent has a knight here, and let's say it's 2 cost. Soldier is just a 1 cost, right? And on that next turn, that means you have a 3 mana advantage over your opponent to play a bigger card. Right? Because they have 2 mana set up here, and you got your 1 mana back. So that extra mana lets you return with a lot more bite, right? Oh yeah. And this also promotes you to not only play at the bottom level, to have longer lasting cards, but also at the middle and top levels. Because the top level is the most important, right? Whatever goes on there this turn disappears. This also means you can do things like playing 10 cost cards at the top level, which is a weird thing to think about now. Now big cards actually want to maybe not stay on the field that long, right? Maybe you want it to be on the top level. Just for that turn. And you want to wreak havoc. And then on the next turn, it disappears. So you can play any other card from your hand again. Which is really cool. Then again, You know, you also have to consider what if your opponent plays a counter spell that turn. You know, hey, I dropped my 10 cost this turn. You just played your 2 cost counter spell. Now you have 8 costs. Now you have 8 resources left over to do whatever you want onto the board and wreck my face. That's also a really, really good risk and risk weighting. Oh, yes! Yes! Yes, so bigger costs come at, you know, like, they are more risk prone to responses, right? Yes, yes, yes. This is so good. This is great. Oh, yes, 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 yes. Okay. And maybe you want that, you know, like on the middle ground. So it has a little bit more staying power, but if your opponent doesn't have any answers, well, if your opponent does come up with an answer, you aren't completely ruined. Okay. We're going to design with this. We're going to design with the resource bank. That is it for resources. This is like really probably like the dumbest thing I've thought of, but we're gonna try and make it work. I've been your host, not. Wait, sorry. I think that will be all for today. Yes. Okay. This is great. I've been your host, Notte, and wherever you are, have a good rest of your day. お、その出した